motivation is garbage. Yup. Mel Robbins, one of the most successful motivational speakers in the world, just said, motivation is garbage. You see, you're making the same mistake we all make when we think about motivation. You're waiting to feel motivated first before you take action. And you've been told a lie about motivation. See, you've been made to believe that you got to feel motivated, that feeling, that emotion is going to come before the action. It's actually the opposite. You got to take action and the motivation comes. And that's why the first takeaway is motivation is garbage. Because my definition of motivation is that it's just a feeling and it comes and it goes. Okay? That's the way that you've been using it. And the irony is you need motivation. Motivation is fundamental. You need this desire to move in order to finish a project. You got to have motivation to get out of bed, to move off the couch, to head to that networking meeting. And here's what I want to teach you in today's episode. How to do what you need to do when you don't feel like it. That is a skill. That is what is missing in your life right now. And I know that you felt motivated before. You felt motivated when you're on a team and lots of people are yelling at you. You felt motivated when you need to pay your bills. But the truth is, when you're alone and you got something that you need to do that's hard or that's, I don't know, going to require some effort or that scares you a little bit or it's going to put you out there, guess what's not going to be there? Motivation. You're going to come up with every excuse in the book why you shouldn't make your calls, why you shouldn't go to the gym, why you don't feel like going out of bed. And that's because if you rely on the feeling of motivation first, you're waiting for something that's never going to come. That's why you've spent years thinking about what you need to do instead of just doing what you need to do. Waiting for motivation is a trap because you're never going to feel like doing the things you need to do to create a better life, period. Have you ever noticed that the little things are always the hardest things to push yourself to do? Especially when you're in a rut, especially when you feel down, especially when your problems feel enormous. How hard is it to get to the gym? Honestly, it's like next to impossible some days. Or what about speaking up at work? How many times have you sat silently, you got something to share, but you can't muster up the motivation to raise your hand or speak up? Or ordering something healthy for lunch? How easy is it to just, screw it, I'll have the cheeseburger and the french fries and the ice cream sundae for dessert instead of ordering the salad? Why? Well, because you're waiting to feel ready to make that choice. You're waiting to feel motivated to do what you need to do. This was me for a long time. Heck, I was in so much trouble several years ago. I didn't have the motivation to get out of bed and face my problems. And one of the mistakes that I was making during this period in my life is I was waiting around to feel ready to take the steps that I needed to take in order to address the stuff that was going wrong in my life. I guarantee you, you know exactly what you need to do right now in order to be healthier. You do. If you don't, you can Google it, and then you'll have a bunch of things that you could do. Knowing what you need to do just makes you smarter. The $100 million skill that I want to teach you is how you make yourself get out of bed, how you make yourself apply for that job, how you make yourself face the issues you're avoiding. That's how you change your life. And for a long time, when my life was going off the rails, I was waiting, hoping, praying, wishing, wanting to wake up one morning and just suddenly feel motivated to change everything. And that's where this story begins. I got to take you back to a moment in time in my life where my problems were so big that I nearly lost everything that I cared about. And if I had sat around and waited for motivation to strike, I would be divorced. I would be bankrupt. I would have torn my family apart. I would probably be an alcoholic. I would definitely not be hosting this podcast. But thank God, I discovered something extraordinary that's going to change your life. And so let me tell you the story. I got to take you all the way back to 2007, and this is what was going on. So at the time, I was 40 years old, and my husband and I had 3 kids under the age of 10. And my husband and his best friend had gone into the restaurant business. It had always been a dream of theirs. And the first restaurant was a small little pizza joint, 40 seats. It was an absolute home run. So proud of my husband and our best friend. And so in success, they decided to expand. And like complete idiots, we cashed out our entire life savings. We took out a home equity line because that's basically free money, right? You know, we cashed out a bunch of credit cards because what could possibly go wrong in the restaurant business? Well, basically everything did. Location number 2 was the wrong location. Location number 3 was way too expensive. And then all of a sudden, 2008 hit. And here in the United States, that was the year that massive housing market collapse happened. And we found ourselves $800,000 in debt. Chris and his best friend were not able to make payroll. I then lost my job. And everything started to spiral. And here's the thing. Never in a million years did I think that at the age of 41, I would be on the verge of losing my house. I would be unemployed. I would be embarrassed and ashamed and just spiraling. That was not on my vision board. And what happens when your life goes off the rails or you suddenly experience some kind of unexpected setback, whether it's a death or you get fired or some tragedy hits your life, you know what's not there? Motivation. I'll tell you what's there. Fear, shame, procrastination, depression, anxiety. I had all of that and more. You want to know how I faced this moment in my life? Like a champ. I basically drank myself into the ground and screamed at my husband every time I saw him because clearly he tried to do this on purpose. And funny, that sort of coping skill, it actually didn't help the situation. It made it a lot worse. And here's the other interesting fact about this moment in time. Even though I literally felt like I had been pushed off a cliff without a parachute, I knew what I could do. I knew that it would help if I looked for a job. I knew that I could call my parents and tell them what was going on. I knew I should reach out to friends. I knew that I should still exercise. I knew that I shouldn't drink so much. I knew that my husband was trying everything he could to solve the financial situation and to fix the business. And yet, I didn't do any of those things. Why? Because I didn't feel motivated to do those things. I felt depressed. I felt anxious. I felt angry. I felt scared. And those feelings are what kept me trapped. I didn't know what I'm about to teach you. I didn't know that I could take action before I felt ready. I didn't know how to push myself. I just knew that I was going to be fucked if I didn't figure this out. And so, one night, everything changed. And you're going to often hear me say on this podcast, you're one decision away from a different life. Do not wait around for the motivation to make that decision. One decision away. So I'm sitting there on a Monday night in 2008 outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where your life is so bad that you're giving yourself a pep talk. I mean, that is kind of a pathetic moment. It's one thing if a friend gives you a pep talk, but if you got to give it to yourself. And so I'm sitting there watching TV, and we're about a week away from our first bankruptcy proceeding. Chris has not been paid in 6 months. My checks are bouncing left and right. We have pulled our daughter out of town soccer because we cannot afford the $125 fee. I am hiding from friends. We have not paid the mortgage in months. It's just a disaster. And I'm watching TV and I'm giving myself this pep talk. And I'm like, all right, that's it, Mel. That's it. Tomorrow morning, woman, it's the new you. Tomorrow morning, you gotta look for a job. You gotta stop drinking so much. You gotta call your parents and ask for some money. You have got to stop screaming at Chris. And by God, woman, when that alarm clock goes off, you cannot hit that snooze button 5 times. You cannot lay there like a human pot roast marinating in fear. You, woman, have got to get out of bed and you have got to get those kids on that bus. And all of a sudden, across the television screen, I saw a rocket launch at the end of a commercial.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And it gave me this crazy idea. I thought, oh my God, that's it. That's the answer. That's the answer to getting up. Tomorrow morning, when that alarm clock rings, Mel, you are going to launch yourself out of bed like a rocket ship. You are going to move so fast that you won't be in that bed when that anxiety and that depression pins you there like a gravity blanket. You are going to launch like a rocket. Now, it could have been the 4 bourbon Manhattans I had that gave me that idea because I was drinking an awful lot back then. But for whatever reason, I'll never forget it. It was a Tuesday in Massachusetts. And that's the very first time I saw it. And when I first explain this to you, I really want to pause for a second. Because the truth is, I didn't know how to do this. I didn't know how to push myself. I was the human example that was the opposite of motivation. I don't even know what that word is. All I knew is that nobody was coming. That nobody was going to ride in on their white horse and fix this situation. That nobody was going to pay my bills. Nobody was going to fix the restaurants. Nobody was going to force me to look for a job. That as much as I wanted and wished that somebody would fix my life, that it was my responsibility to do it. And that I had to figure out how to push myself. And that's the second takeaway from this episode. No one's coming. No one's coming to do the work for you. All those things that you want in your life, all the dreams that you have, they are your responsibility. And the only thing that has been missing is this hack that I'm about to teach you. You have made the same mistake that I made, which is waiting and hoping I would wake up one morning and feel courageous and motivated enough to do the things I needed to do. And so when you embrace the idea that motivation's garbage and no one is coming and it's your responsibility and you are capable of doing this, that's going to change your life. So let's go back to the question that I get from everybody, which is, I get it, Mel, I get it, but how? How do you push yourself when you don't feel like it? That's the $1 million question. So let's go back. Let's go back to the story in 2008, because that Tuesday morning in February outside of Boston, Massachusetts, that's where I learned the secret to hacking motivation. This is going to change everything. So that morning, the alarm went off. And I'm going to unpack this very slowly because I really want you to pay attention. Because this is the secret to everything. And this simple rule and tool that you're about to learn also embodies decades of neurological and psychological research, which I will also unpack for you. And so the alarm goes off, and all of a sudden I noticed this window of time. It's a moment where you hesitate and you think about what you need to do instead of doing what you need to do. It's unmistakable when you see this moment of hesitation. It's a habit. We all have it. The alarm goes off, and I immediately remember the rocket launch. And I remember that declaration that I had made the night before. I'm going to launch myself out of bed like NASA launches a rocket. And instead of doing it, I started thinking about doing it. And as soon as you start thinking about doing something, You open this window of time. I call it this 5-second moment of hesitation. And inside of that moment where you start to think, and that morning in 2008, I started thinking, ugh, I don't want to launch myself out of bed. It's cold. It's dark. I don't feel like it. This bed is so warm. How the hell is this going to help anything anyway? I don't want to. And inside all of that thinking is where the anxiety and the excuses and the depression and the overwhelm, where it all starts to spin. And I could feel my hand reaching for the snooze button because it had become a habit to wake up and think about getting out of bed and instead hit the snooze button and delay what I needed to do, numb all the thoughts. And as I'm reaching for the snooze button, I don't know what came over me. But that morning, for whatever reason, I just started counting backwards. The same way that NASA does. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then I moved and stood up and I'm like, whoa, that's weird. And I went on with my day. And then the next morning, the alarm went off and I remembered the rocket launch. And immediately I started thinking about doing it instead of doing it. And again, the excuses roll in and I again feel myself reaching for the snooze button. And I count backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I stand up. Weird. The third morning is when it really kicked in for me because I heard the alarm go off. I remembered the rocket launch thing. I started thinking about it. I don't want to. It's dark. Who cares? I count backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I stand up. Now, I want to stop here for a second and explain a little bit of the research. So, researchers, psychologists, neuroscientists explain this 5-second window this way. There are two types of people. There are people that have a bias toward thinking, which is the habit of hesitating and thinking about what you need to do instead of doing what you need to do. And then there are people that have a bias toward action, which is having the habit of being able to push yourself to take action regardless of how you feel. This 5-second countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, helps you move from being a person that has a bias toward thinking and become a person that has a bias toward action. And this countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, is the secret to hacking motivation. It's the secret to pushing yourself to take action regardless of how you feel. It is the secret to everything. So that third morning, I sort of, said to myself, okay, so, because, I'm cynical. You're going to get to know me. I'm a lawyer by education, and I'm somebody that's like really analytical. And so I tend to also be really cynical. And so, I'm standing there in my bedroom and I'm like, okay, great. You just created something irritating, Mel, that helps you get out of bed. How the hell is this going to help? And I'm like, whoa. You're about to lose everything you care about. Your marriage is on the rocks. Your family will be torn apart. You're going to lose this house, woman. Why not just try this thing? Why not for one day, any moment today, where you know exactly what you should or could do, but you don't feel like it? Just count backwards. I mean, what the hell? It's not like it's going to make it worse. What if it made it better? So I walk out into the kitchen, and my husband, Chris, is standing in front of the fridge. And you know how that thing happens where you see somebody you love and you just want to kill them? You know how that happens? Well, so poor Chris is standing there, minding his own business, probably trying to get out of the house fast before, his bitchy wife wakes up and starts screaming at him. And I see him, and I'm like, but here's the thing. I didn't want to kill the guy. I loved him. I just was so on edge and stressed out, and it's so much easier to be angry and frustrated than it is to be afraid. But in that moment, I counted silently to myself, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and something strange happened. Like I could feel the pressure and agitation in my body release. And I was able to take a breath and speak to the man from a place of my values instead of screaming at him, which I had been doing for 6 months. I see my sneakers. I know I need to exercise, but who the hell wants to exercise in February outside of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? I'm out the door. I see the phone. I don't know about you, but I hate people. I hate networking. I hate 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm picking up the phone, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm picking it up again, and I'm calling friends, and I'm telling people the truth. I need a job. I got laid off. Chris and I are in financial trouble. Like, I need help here. I pick up the phone again. I call my parents. And slowly but surely, I am taking the actions that change your life. And look, it doesn't work overnight. It works over time. And that's important because true change builds over time. Quick fixes don't stick. If you want to change anything, you got to be in it and you got to repeat it. And that's one of the other things that I love about this countdown technique that I started calling the 5-second rule. You have 5 seconds to move. You have 5 seconds to push yourself, to take action. And if you don't move in that 5-second window, your brain will contaminate your motivation to act. Using this countdown technique, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, in moments where you feel yourself hesitate, or you feel the fear coming on, or you feel yourself talking yourself out of it, or you feel the self-doubt or the fear kicking in, when you start counting backwards, the decision to count backwards means you're making a decision to move. You're making a decision to move before you feel like it. You're making a decision to summon your courage, your confidence, your desire for something more than the place you're in right now. The counting backwards also works because counting requires focus. Now, I didn't know why it worked then, okay? And my husband started using it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Took it into business. They start talking to landlords and renegotiating leases. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And they're facing the issues in their business head on and talking to investors about what's going on. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. They're restructuring the P&L and they're having to lay off people that they love. Hardest thing in the world to do as a business owner. And so step by step, decision by decision, using this 5-second rule and the countdown technique, my husband and I were able to make the decisions and take the actions that aligned with where we wanted our lives to go, instead of waiting around to feel ready to do it. We were able to push ourselves 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to take action, to get where we wanted to go instead of sitting where we were hoping motivation would show up. That's why this thing works. And, here's the truth. I never intended to tell anybody about this thing because, first of all, it sounds kind of stupid. Okay, wait a minute, Mel. You're telling me if I just count backwards, my life is going to change? That sounds kind of dumb. The other reason why I didn't tell anybody about this little 5-second rule thing is because I had no idea why it worked. I just knew it worked. I didn't know if I had tapped into some ancestral witchery and this was some magic spell. I didn't know if God was just giving me this little gift. I just figured this was this secret thing that came out of the sky in a moment of desperation, and Chris and I would use this and it would be our little thing. Well, that all changed in 2010. So, a couple years goes by where we've been using the 5-second rule to get out of bed, to exercise, to get our marriage back on track, to get the drinking under control. I get a job as a local radio host for $25 an hour in order to, pay bills. And we're just moving and shaking and all this stuff is happening, okay? And so what ends up happening is in 2010, I get a call from a college friend saying, hey, I got somebody that's putting together a conference in San Francisco, and they need somebody to talk about job change. And Mel, you have changed your job more than an ABBA cover band changes costumes in a set. Would you be willing to go give a talk in San Francisco about changing your career? And then she said the magic words. They're going to give you 2 free plane tickets and 2 nights at the St. Regis. And I thought, oh my God, Chris and I haven't had a vacation in 4 years. We have liens on our house. Hell yes, I will give a speech on a stage in San Francisco. Now, here's what you need to know. I had never given a speech on a stage in my life. I just wanted a freaking free vacation. So we head out to San Francisco, and this conference happened to be the first ever TEDx conference that was put on. And at the time, TEDx was not like the thing that it is now. None of the talks were online. This was the first spinoff. And so there was like almost no training. And if you've ever seen my TEDx talk, you are witnessing a 21-minute long panic attack. Literally, look closely at about minute 1, and you will notice that I have that neck rash that people get when they get really anxious or when they drink too much. And by minute 19, I was so spun around and anxious, I was basically floating in the air. I completely forgot how I was supposed to end that speech. And I look out into that auditorium and I go, oh, I know. I do this thing. I call it the 5-second rule. The moment you have an instinct to act, you got to move within 5 seconds or else your brain will kill it. And then I said, thank you. And I was so out of my mind, I gave out my email address. I left the stage. Chris was back there staring at the floor. I'm like, that was horrible. He's like, it wasn't that bad. And I'm like, I am never giving a speech again. And then something crazy happened. A year later, TEDx put that talk online. So now we're talking 2012. Another year passes. I don't even know it's online. I'm busy now, working full time. I've got healthcare benefits. We still have liens on the house, by the way, but we're making the ends work. Chris has left the restaurant business. He's getting sober. He's becoming a yoga instructor. He's healing himself. He's doing all kinds of stuff. And I'm just like doing whatever I can to pay our bills. And all of a sudden I start getting all these like emails from people. And by people, I mean strangers. And it was people around the world writing to me because I had given out my freaking email address. And they were telling me, Mel, holy cow, I saw that thing in San Francisco and I've been using the 5-second rule for 18 months and my business is on pace to double and I'm present with my kids. My gosh, Mel, I've been using this 5-second thing to reach out to executives and they're responding back. Hey, Mel, I saw that 5-second rule talk you gave and I have taught it to my team. We've been more productive in the last 48 hours than we have been all year. Well, why? Well, you're not selling anything if you're thinking about selling something. The 5-second rule cuts through that bias we have toward thinking about what we need to do, and it pushes you to do what you need to do, which is why people around the world use it now to be more productive, to sell more, to grow businesses, to lose weight. Like the ways that you can use this are just absolutely endless. Should you teach this to your kids?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and read.
You might want to be careful with that because they will use this with you, you know. My kids use it with me all the time. It's totally annoying. One of the things that has been just absolutely amazing is that we hear from medical professionals and from people around the world every single day who explain that the 5-second rule is so effective at helping them stay sober. I mean, just listen to my friend Kyle.
Not only has 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 helped me overcome an addiction to the snooze button, but it's also helped me to stay sober and away from substances. Even in finding out that my grandma's cancer was back this weekend, where normally that would send me into a spiral to make some choices that were not in my best interest. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm able to stay strong for my family, keep my career going, and continue the good progress I've made after 3.5 years of sober.
Way to go, Kyle. Here's the thing. When strangers start to write to you about how they're using something you put out into the world to change their lives, I felt this obligation to not only share the 5-second rule and share other people's stories, but I felt an obligation to understand exactly why this thing worked. And so for the past 7 years, I have been engaged in a extensive research project about the 5-second rule. I've talked to the world's leading neurologists and psychologists and experts in habits. And what I've come to understand is this. The 5-second rule and the act of counting backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, is called metacognition. That is a simple word that means brain hack or cheat code. That means we can use a metacognition technique like the 5-second rule, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, as a way to switch gears intentionally and cut off the part of the brain where you are sabotaging yourself and tap into the part of the brain where you can take control. In habit research, the 5-second rule is classified as what they call a starting ritual. A starting ritual is a positive trigger that triggers positive habits, positive new behavior. A starting ritual is something that interrupts an old pattern. And when you start counting backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you're interrupting the old pattern, whether that old pattern is a habit of worrying or a habit of having self-critical thoughts, or whether it is a pattern of reaching for a glass of wine as you're cooking dinner. The second you feel the thought engage, or you feel yourself reaching for the snooze button or reaching for that wine, start counting backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you interrupt the old pattern or habit. When you get to 1, now your prefrontal cortex is engaged, and you move and replace the old pattern with the new, healthier, positive pattern. You replace the negative thought with a positive thought. You replace the glass of wine with a mocktail. You replace the snooze button by throwing your sheets off and standing up. That's why this thing works. And one of the reasons why, because I think I said, very clearly, I never intended to share this with anybody. This went viral on its own. And the reason why I believe it went viral on its own is because it was meant to. And I was the person, for whatever reason, that the universe selected to be out there sharing it. And the other reason why it has gone crazy viral and it's used in clinical settings is because, like so many of the tools that I'm going to share with you on this podcast, it encapsulates, I don't even know if I said that word right, but whatever, you know what I mean, decades of psychological and neurological research. This is a tool that you can teach to anybody, you can use in any moment. It always works because it's based in science. How freaking cool is that? Hey, it's Mel, and welcome to the Mel Robbins podcast. Let's do this thing. All right. I am so fired up. First of all, I wish I could reach my arms through the air and put my arms around you and give you a huge bear hug. I just feel so grateful. So grateful that you're here listening to the 3rd episode. I feel so grateful of the support that is poured in from around the world.